Hi, thank you for coming to this talk. I'm going to present our paper called Online Harassment in Majority Contexts, Examining Harms and Remedies Across Countries. This paper was a collaboration between myself, Amna Batool, who helped design these slides, Jenny Doe, Sylvia Darling, Gabriel Grill, Daricia Wilkinson, Mehtab Kentaro Toyama, and Louisa Ashwell. We know that online harassment is widespread. It's experienced in countries around the world with sometimes severe harms and challenges in how to respond to it. We also know that social media governance is post hoc, punitive, and Western-centric. Post hoc meaning it happens after the harassment takes place. Typically, it's punitive in that it focuses on what should happen to the person who did the harassment. And it's Western-centric, meaning that a lot of the policies and decision-making takes place in US or European context. As one example, here's a chart that's a few years old now, but it kind of indicated how many days it took Facebook to address inauthentic behavior after an employee flagged the case. And it showed that in some countries like Poland, Philippines, and the US, it was a day or maybe a week, whereas in Honduras, Mexico, and Azerbaijan, it was about a year or more before it was processed. So in this paper, we wanted to look at what are perceptions of harm and preferences for remedies regarding online harassment. And we focused on regions that were typically overlooked or maybe underattended to in online harassment scholarship. So regions outside of the US and Europe predominantly. We also focused on regions where members of the project team were from, so they could just speak as one voice to experiences and cultures within that region. The survey was with 4,000 participants. We used a combination of a survey firm and our own recruitment in regions, the Caribbean and Mongolia, where survey firms don't have a presence. So we presented participants with 4 different harassment scenarios. We chose these based on kind of a range of harassment types and potential harms that might be important to understand. So the scenarios were first, taken sexual photos of you without your permission and shared them on social media. Second, spread malicious rumors about you on social media. The third was created fake accounts and sent you malicious comments through direct messages on social media. And the fourth was insulted or disrespected you on social media. We then asked about perceived harms associated with those harassment types. So would you be concerned for your psychological well-being? Would you be concerned for your personal safety? Would you be concerned for your family reputation? And would you consider this sexual harassment against you? We chose these based on prior literature and our understanding of potential harms that might be experienced across the various regions we studied. And we chose 7 platform responses or remedies that could happen, also based on existing practices on sites and prior literature. These were removing the content from the site, labeling the content as a violation of the site's rules, banning the person from the site, paying you money, requiring a public apology from the person, revealing the person's name and photograph publicly on the site, and by giving a negative rating to the person. We asked demographic questions and questions from the World Values Survey about whether people can be trusted, how much confidence you have in police and in the courts, and how secure you feel in your neighborhood these days. And we just presented a subset of the questions here that are used in this paper. Focus on findings now. In terms of perceptions of harm, we find that the sexual photos example is the highest in harm compared to the other 3, followed by spreading rumors, malicious messages, and insult or disrespect. In terms of factors that predict the variance in harm ratings, country was the strongest predictor, followed by gender, and we focused on men and women. We had a free response option for participants across countries, but given that some countries, people can't safely report their gender necessarily, we focused our analysis on just men and women, and we speak to the limitations of that in the paper. And then security in your neighborhood, number of children, trust in other people, and trust in courts and police. In terms of perception of harm, we see that Colombia, India, and Malaysia are higher in perceptions of harm on average, whereas the United States is lowest, and then Russia and Austria. This is a heat map, and it shows differences in harm ratings based on the harassment type and harm type pairing, so 16 overall, the 4x4. And here we just highlight that reputational harm is more prominent in some countries relative to the US, which is the reference variable here, and relative to like Russia and Austria, for example. So it's much higher, reputational harms are much higher in India, China, Mongolia, the places where the blue shading is darkest. In terms of preferences for remedies, removing content and banning are rated higher as preferred remedies. Paying people is lowest, followed by revealing people's identities and rating people. An apology is in the middle. Again, we see countries the most predictive of remedy preferences, followed by children, gender, security, and then trust in police, courts, and other people. Here we see that Colombia, Russia, and Saudi Arabia rate remedies just overall on average higher in their preferences, whereas Pakistan, Mongolia, and Cameroon participants rate it lower, and there's a range in the middle. We asked about who should be responsible for online harassment, and this was a qualitative question, so we coded the data and looked for high-level themes here. So one high-level theme is that the predominant response was that the site should be responsible for dealing with harassment. About half of participants said this. About 25% of the 3,000 or plus participants said that the government should be responsible. This was inclusive of courts, law enforcement, cyber police, and different terms that were used. So in terms of high-level reflections here, one of the biggest takeaways that we reflected on ourselves as a team and think is important to communicate is the importance of reputational harm. And for people who are based in the US, from the US, the way we might think of reputational harm may vary widely in other regions and countries around the world, where reputational harm is associated with gender, with cultures of honor, and with severe consequences, like one of the examples I showed in the beginning of an honor killing in Pakistan of a woman who was a prominent social media user, and her family felt she was bringing shame to them. Another key point is to know that law enforcement responses will vary widely across regions, but in some regions like Pakistan, for example, which Amna can speak to in her own PhD research, the police may mock or shame or further punish people, women specifically, who experience online harassment and try to go through legal remedies or pathways to manage it. Familial backlash may be higher in regions, honor-driven countries where there isn't the same kind of principles or value systems that might dictate what should happen or who should be responsible and how should families engage with this. One thing to note with gender that's important is that even though country was the biggest predictor overall of harm, gender mattered a lot as well, and those intersected in some ways. So for example, some countries, women participants might perceive less harm than men in other countries. So that's important to think about in terms of gender and regional differences. And our biggest kind of key principle here is that a range of factors, social factors, economic, cultural factors that have a lot of complexity associated with them that might be have some coherence, as we said, at the national or regional level, will have a profound effect on how countries engage with, experience, respond to, and address online harassment harms. Thank you so much for listening to this talk.